Hello and welcome to another episode of the Anfield Leadership Interview Program. Today I am thrilled to be speaking with Gail Kaufman. Gail, thanks for joining us and I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, Barry. Well, first of all, congratulations on the launch of your business. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your leadership series. So happy to be here.
Great. If you wouldn't mind, just to give our audience a bit of an overview of Gail's experience, team scope, responsibilities that you've had in your recent past.
Well, in my recent past, so I led a team of around 20 with 4 direct reports with national Canada responsibility. And then in 2021, after spending many years in the corporate world, I took a short breather to assess, how I wanted to spend the next few years of my career. And so, that led me on a journey to having lots of discussions with a lot of people. And one of the things that became clear to me, kind of in this, exploratory time of my life was, there's really a need that organizations have, for someone who has a depth of experience, who's strategic, but who also knows how to get things done, how to bring that strategy to life, by working, with and through people. But sometimes it's difficult, especially in times of uncertainty. Not everyone can just add headcount whenever they want. That's a big commitment. So the ability to have a resource that they can tap for a project or whatever, some kind of initiative or bringing a strat plan to life. Anyway, so with this insight, I decided to go on my own. So I started my own consulting and advisory firm, and I have just completed my first fiscal year and my first corporate tax filing. And, if someone had asked me a couple of years ago if this was part of my future plan, no. But, it was part of the exploratory process. And I have to tell you, I'm having a fabulous time. I work with great people. I'm learning tons, and it's really good. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm a team of 1 currently, and working with my clients, and that varies.
Well, I will offer a congratulations back to you because, as we've discussed previously, it is about finding your passion and going down that avenue. And I think both of us have certainly satisfied some sort of thing intrinsically we didn't necessarily know existed. And it's ultimately about enjoying what it is that you do.
Yeah, and my corporate life was fantastic. And now I can just, I can port those skills over and using the same skills and leadership abilities in changing environments. So I find that really interesting.
Well, that's great. All right, well, let's jump into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. I'd like to begin by having you describe to the audience, what does the word leadership itself mean to you?
This is a good question, and we talk about leadership all the time, but I really had to sit down and reflect myself, really, like, what does Gail think about what this means? So to me, in real simple terms, leadership is essentially about having a vision and bringing that vision to life through people. That's where I land on a very simple definition of leadership.
Excellent.
And so there's a few things I'll just add to that, if I could. So, when I think about characteristics of a leader, number 1 for me is acting with honesty and integrity, because that is the foundation of trust. And you can't be an effective leader without cultivating trust. The second piece, is around emotional intelligence. And again, a lot of people talk about emotional intelligence, but self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, all that. But that's foundational. You have to like people. You have to enjoy, I think naturally, some people are blessed with it, and perhaps it can be built, but I think, emotional intelligence is really important. Maybe a subset of emotional intelligence, but worth mentioning separately. I think, a genuine interest in raising people up around them, getting to know people, giving clear and honest feedback, like wanting, really having a desire to move people.
Right.
Number four, taking accountability, when times are good and when times are not so good, because we get to enjoy both, and it's really about accepting responsibility for where the buck stops. And then the last thing I thought about was really vulnerability, which honestly, I struggle with that because it's often perceived as weakness, and really it's about courage. So I think leadership is ultimately about courage. So
It's funny. I mean, I resonate with all the things that you said, but the last one, when you said vulnerability, I can absolutely relate, because I think for me and for you and for lots of people, I think that's the one key, last or most crucial element when you're looking to quote unquote cross that leadership bridge, that ultimately allows your team and clients or whomever it is you're interacting with to truly get a better sense of you, the human being. And that's an attribute that people, to your point, perceive as a weakness, when ultimately the more you come across as relatable, the more people actually migrate towards you versus migrating away from you. So that's
yeah,
great insight. Thank you.
great.
For other aspiring leaders to be great leaders, what few characteristics do you feel are essential for them in the early stages or within that leadership journey, outside of the ones you already mentioned that identify you?
Well, I think in addition to what we've already talked about, I think there's this perception, and again, I've made this, for so long, is that as a leader, that you have to have the answers and you have to know everything. And, that puts a lot of pressure and it's completely unrealistic. So I think, learning to empower your team, not thinking that you have to have all the answers, but empowering them to find their own answers while providing, coaching and support, and, obviously holding them accountable. But I think that's a big one. And I think, as leaders develop, I think the value and importance of feedback is really, really critical throughout this, whether it's, formal, like a 360, or an informal network of feedback sessions that you cultivate through trusted people who will give you honest feedback, like
Right.
real feedback that will help you grow. Working with a coach, I think, is important, something that I still do now, and I've done periodically in the past. I think that's really important. So at the end of the day, it's putting what you're learning into action, and it's about continuous learning. And I think about now the times that we live in, information, access to really good information has never been so abundant, and accessible. So I think those are the things that come to mind as you sort of start to build your leadership muscles.
Right. Well, it's funny because knowing a number of the people that you worked with in your most recent corporate role that were on your team, and I think about, some of the youthful people on that team and the brilliance they brought to the table and the subject matter expertise they had in an element, within that broader team goal and broader team dynamic. You're absolutely right when you say that, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and you have to be able to, get that feedback from people and always be learning from what others are bringing to the table.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. I'd like to ask you about any formal leadership training that you've been fortunate enough to attend during your career. What was it you found most beneficial, and what were some of the key takeaways for you?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to attend, many sessions over the years. And again, one of the common threads to me, the ones that I got the most out of, were the ones that started with a really robust assessment, right? So strength, weaknesses, blind spots, and how they apply to leadership and agility, and a bunch of other stuff that they measure. So I had the opportunity to go to IMD a few years ago, and that was prefaced by a particularly robust assessment, where you had a really good debrief. So before you even got into the classroom and to the learning sessions, you really had a pretty good set of resources, right?
Right.
And some So that's one thing. Putting your learnings into action, really, really critical. So I found the sessions that involved role playing, which everyone hates, and honestly it strikes terror. And I don't know
Yeah.
anyone who's comfortable with that, but it's
Right.
sticky. It's helpful. So where you can start to put your learnings into immediate action, and
In a
you know
controlled and safe environment.
in a controlled and safe environment, yeah, because you need to continue to practice that. But the earlier you start to put that into motion, the better. So, I think everything starts with self-awareness and good assessment tools, good feedback. And then you can really know, what are my strengths? Yay. What are some of the opportunities areas and blind spots that I might have that I need to consciously work on and get help with.
That's great. I appreciate that answer. And as I'm hearing you, I think back to my own journey a little bit. And, I used an assessment called the Hogan. And
Mhm.
regardless of what the assessment says, and obviously you want to be working on blind spots the most, because strengths are strengths and those are great. But I think it's the mindset of the person. And you mentioned that going into it and being open to learn more about yourself. A lot of people don't want to know how others see them, or don't want to know what's perceived as a weakness, because they just rather avoid it. And I think you mentioned the phrase self-aware. And to me, self-awareness is as much about a desire to recognize and confront and reach in and commit to how do you improve those quote unquote blind spots as part of your continuous development.
Absolutely.
That's great. What sort of leader would you say that your most recent team would describe you as?
Well, I would say they would probably say that I was honest. One of my, personal values is honesty. So I would say they would think I was honest. I would say approachable, interested in their development and well-being. And I think they would say that I didn't always get it right, but I tried my best.
Well, that's
So,
great. I like the what resonates with me there is interested in their development, right? I mean, it's as a leader, it's important to have that human connection. And I've fortunate enough to have observed, having worked in the same organization together for a few years, number of years, to observe the passion and trust that those team members inherently placed in you. It wasn't something I observed that had to be earned. It was naturally there, and we don't get to see the behind the scenes dynamics. But just as a outside looking in observation, I think a lot of that came from your natural honesty and the tone and tenor that you set amongst your organization.
well, thank you. Those are kind words. I did have an amazing team that I felt privileged to work with every day. So
100%.
it was
So
good.
switching a little bit towards more of a communication discussion, how would you define your communication style, and what do you feel are some of the benefits of that approach?
Well, I think I talked about openness and approachability. I think that's really, really important. And also one of the things that came up often, in engagement surveys where, people are always wanting to know, how do I fit into the big picture, and how does my role and how do my goals roll up? So that was a big thing for me. Is I think it's really important to know, what's sort of the big picture, what are we trying to accomplish here? But most importantly, day to day, how am I contributing? How are my contributions making a difference? How am I measured? And what does success look like for me? So that was really, really important. So I think having that set up, having a lot of clarity around goals, measurement, and then ongoing feedback and all of that. That's important. Obviously regular team meetings, really good communication. Who's doing what? How can we help each other? What's happening in other parts of the business? One-on-ones, really important, where you talk about all kinds of stuff, not just business, but you get to know them as people, right? What are their needs? What do they want out of their career? What's happening in their life? And of course, feedback, always important. At any, I don't care who you are in an organization, feedback it's a gift, always. So, I think generally that's how I approached the communication. I think, better to try to over communicate than under communicate, but getting everyone involved.
Okay. No, I mean that does make a lot of sense, and I like the human factor of that, to say, hey, one-on-ones obviously have their purpose towards goals, but I think to your point earlier, that's where you create those structured opportunities to allow each other to see more of the innate person that's there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
where you can be more human, and we're leaders who don't have that natural awareness to show their true self and be vulnerable. That's absolutely probably one of the best places to start that activity and gain that experience and see how that naturally
Yeah.
felt in that
Yeah.
environment.
That's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
My favorite question of all interviews: what would Gail say is her superpower or greatest strength, if you will?
Well, I think I have been told that I'm a really good collaborator. And so, because I enjoy working with people, because, the dynamics of the people in an organization is so important to me. I'm a people person. So, I think collaboration is important. It's something that I can do, with, I don't want to say easily, because, there's always complexities and challenges when you're working across, if it's a big business. But anyways, I think collaboration is one of my skills. So, I mentioned this earlier, but it's also being able to work at a strategic level.
Right.
But then, that's one thing. But then how does that translate into a business? How do you make real and sustainable change through that? And that takes people. That takes working across, geographies, functional areas, different parts of the business, and making that work. So I think, yeah, the ability to work with people, in the past, have had pretty good success on some major initiatives, but not without a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and rolling up the sleeves. But I think that's where the buck stops. So, and to that end, I recently received my change management certification. Again, just to continue to sort of strengthen that skill set. I think, it's a continuous learning unto itself. So,
Well, no, I mean, congrats to you for having that continuous learning mindset, but knowing some of the pioneering work that you did in your most recent corporate role and how that was, quote unquote, game changing, not just for the organization, but for the industry, that a lot of competitors have not necessarily fast followed, but certainly followed, right? It's also being able to have that vision. And you said earlier in the conversation, be that strategic initiative. I would suppose, if I could look back and inside of other competitors, a lot of them probably had the same idea at the same time of wanting to go down that path of e-commerce that I'm referring to, but the capability to take that strategy and execute and work cross-functionally and collaborate and have people buy into a vision that, quote unquote, Gail had to own and the marketing team had to deliver. That certainly takes a unique set of leadership skills to be able to be first to market and have that significant competitive advantage that the organization was able to benefit from.
right, it was a long-term effort. That's, something I'm really proud of in my career is that. So, yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank
All
you.
right. Talking about people with titles and managers versus leaders, and leaders can be anywhere. What do you see as the fundamental difference between a leader?
When I think about leaders, I'm thinking about, someone who has a holistic view of the business, who's really, driving the vision. And when I think about a manager, it's a manager, has a piece of executing the vision, maybe not necessarily setting the vision, but they're both really, really important. So I think it's it's sort of, you've got a leadership at a, very, very broad scope, being more vision driven, and then you've got the managers, and this is a horrible simplification, but they're really working on those different elements that are bringing that to life, and they're both critically important roles and very, very important. So the world needs leaders and the world needs managers. So
Sure.
that's how I see that.
Okay, great. Now, if I'm a manager and I'm looking to aspire in my career and quote unquote, gain opportunity or gain, whether that's, pyramid layered success, what advice would you offer to those looking to become more effective in their careers as leaders?
Geez. I guess, again, I sound like a broken record, but I think it's really important. If you want to become a leader, I think you have to assess where you are. I think you have to understand yourself. I think you have to understand, strengths, weaknesses, and then, I don't know, do you really want to be a leader? Do you really understand what a leader is? And I think that to me is the first step. I really do. I think it's the first step, is really understanding what that means. And then I would say, start to learn, invest in yourself. I would probably, find a mentor, find somebody in the organization that I can identify with and that can help me, that can advise me, that can give me feedback. I think to me, those are the things that I would start to think about doing.
Okay. And as someone takes that journey, what do you believe the impact can be for them in terms of being engaged with a mentor or an effective leader? Like, what can their expectations be? Because I know you've been a mentor yourself.
I just think it's a really good sounding board. So, when I think about the types of conversations I have with my coaches, it's like, what am I working on? Where am I challenged a little bit? Where have I not handled a situation that has worked out as well as it could have? What could I have done differently or better? And so it's sort of it's iterative, right?
Mhm.
It's sort of
Right. But I
the
think critical to that though is, and I sense it in you because I know you as well as I do, there's that insatiable appetite to improve, or not
yes,
necessarily to improve, perceiving that improving is up. It could be improving across by adding a new fundamental skill or having a new epiphany of another way to go about doing things. Or, you mentioned adding the change management certification, right? Those are you identifying opportunities of interest, but certain people don't necessarily wake up saying, I want to do X or Y. It allows that mentorship conversation to help them figure out what is the right path for me to take, and what is the wrong path for me to take based on someone's opinion that they value.
exactly.
Oh, that's
Exactly.
any other thoughts on leadership or your experiences you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I just think, great leaders can make all the difference in the world. And when I think about my experiences and people that have touched me in my career, the ones that have made the most impact, I think about, they were humble, right? They took the time to know me. They shared, regular, honest feedback, but in a kind way, honest but kind.
Yeah.
And they created a safe space. So, in addition to clarity and the other things that you would expect, but when you have that kind of leader, it makes you want to be better. It makes you want to do better, and it gives people a safe environment in which to operate. And then you unleash them. When you take away some of the fear and trepidation, people are capable of amazing things. And I think leaders that allow that to happen and nurture that, I'm happy that I've had that experience, a couple of times. It's remarkable, the impact on the organization, on the business results, on the retention, and all of the things that follow from that.
Well, that's a great insight, and I appreciate that. As you're speaking, I actually took the time to write down kind and safe because they seem so simplistic, but you really need to have a high self-awareness or environmental awareness, whether it's intrinsic or whether it's intentional. Either way you come about it, right? Those are two absolutely critical attributes. And as you're describing those types of people you've interacted with, obviously, we both know one of them that resonates with both of us. And those are absolutely a few
Mhm,
adjectives we'd use to describe those types of individuals. So that's
mhm, mhm.
great. Well, listen, I'd like to thank Gail for joining us today. I believe we were able to learn not just a lot about your leadership style, but more so, even more beneficial, sort of the philosophy that you observed, the philosophies that you've implemented, and the continuous improvement journey that I think really great leaders always find themselves on. It's never a beginning or an end game. So I thank you for that. And I believe others would greatly benefit from the advice that you've offered today and the journey, not that you've already undertaken, but this new and exciting journey that you find yourself on. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to have this chat.
Absolutely. These interviews are available on our YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and search Anfield Business Consultants. Join us next time for another insightful interview on the challenging subject of effective leadership. Thanks for watching and have a great day.